Morning, everyone. My name is Joe Bellick, and I'm the chair of the New York State Cannabis Advisory Board. I believe we have a majority of the board present, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody who is participating in person and via our live stream. I'd also just like to note that some voting board members are joining us via the live stream from private locations due to extraordinary circumstances, and would like to remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and also being recorded, and that a transcript will be available to the public on the Office of Cannabis Management website, cannabis.ny.gov. You can also go to that website for additional information about Cannabis Advisory Board and our meetings. Today, we're going to be getting some updates from OCM and having some conversations about the PLMA regs and the what I refer to public convenience and advantage regulations. And we're also going to be getting an update on the community reinvestment program. So we have a lot to cover today. I wanted to start just by saying that as a group, the CAB has been fighting hard to achieve the role that is required by the MRTA. And it has been an effort that's been going on for almost a year to get the CCB and the OCM to recognize that role. And we still have much work to do, particularly with respect to the CCB, who I would say it's the consensus of the CAB still doesn't acknowledge our role in the way that they should, and is missing out on a lot of expertise that is not present on the CCB, but is present among the CAB members. But there is some good news, and I want to take a minute to acknowledge it and acknowledge OCM and particularly Pat, who is sitting here, because for the first time in the CAB's history, prior to voting on the public convenience and advantage regulations, they were formally sent to the CAB for commentary. There was acknowledged under the MRTA, and it is a huge milestone, one that we appreciate more than I can say and really welcome. I think there's going to be some fine tuning of the process, but I didn't want the moment to pass without acknowledging it, and also extending our sincere thanks to Pat and his team and the council's office and Linda and everybody who worked hard to get us to that moment. And I'm optimistic and hopeful that it will lead to only better results in the regulations and the other aspects of the MRTA. So with that, I would like to take a moment to welcome our acting executive director, Felicia Reed, who is joining us via the live stream. We are so appreciative and honored that you're here, and I wanted to turn it over to you if you wanted to say any welcoming remarks.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. So good morning, Chair Bellick and OCM's colleagues and mission members of the Cannabis Advisory Board. Just pardon my not being with you today. I am actually today later on shadowing OCM's licensing team to better understand their day-to-day experience in getting through our application queues. And that's really important for me and for OCM. But before I tip off, just a few things I wanted to raise. And first, I want to start with a thank you on behalf of everyone at OCM. And if I might, New York's wider cannabis community, I want to say thank you to the CAB. As OCM designs, builds, and works to best support an equitable cannabis market, I want to thank you for your partnership, your wisdom, and more than anything, your energy in this work. Thinking also, and Chair Bellick mentioned, our mutual colleagues in the Cannabis Control Board, please keep challenging OCM to keep at the horizon of a successful and opportunity-rich cannabis market. Just a couple of things on my experience of the last 70 some odd days. I've spent much of the summer listening. That's not really a new trait for me. Growing up, my family moved from state to state. So my brother and I were always the new kids. So I learned to observe and to listen and to reflect deeply, maybe overly cautiously, before acting. At OCM, I wanted to know about the agency, its partners, and our promise. That is the promise we have as an agency and the promises we've made to New Yorkers. If I could sum up the last several weeks in one word, it's actually the word trust. I've heard that word, I can't tell you how many times in the last couple of weeks in very many different contexts, that it's worth really remarking on. Whose trust is ours to lose? Whose trust have we lost? Whose trust must we work to repair? And whose trust are we fighting to earn? And actually, most significantly of all, whose trust will never be ours? And for what reason is that? I think a lot about these things because in some ways in this state and in this industry, trust might be the most important and precious thing. But back to why we're gathered here today and why you guys are gathered here today. Today's meeting was many, many weeks in the making. Chair Bellick referenced that, and I'm thrilled that it's real and that you're all there. Big thank you to the OCM leadership and programmatic teams for your hard work in putting this together, though not so much your 11:19 p.m. emails on the subject. But as most things OCM related, I know today's agenda is very action-packed and hopefully with more thrills than chills. I'm looking forward to the discussion and to sharing all of the work that OCM keeps going. I hope to see you all sooner than later. In fact, I'll actually be at the State Fair next week gawking at butter sculptures, so find me there. But believe me, OCM's agency swag will be very hard to miss. Thank you all again. Thank you, Chair Bellick. Thank you to the staff.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Reed. I'd like to move to approving the minutes of the June 26th Cannabis Advisory Board. Could I have a motion to consider and approve those minutes? Do I have a second? Second. Okay. Anybody opposed? The minutes are approved. I'm now going to turn it over to John, who is going to provide us with a number of updates and lead us through the next portion of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair Bellick. Thank you, CAB board members, and thank you all for who are attending this meeting in person and virtually. It's been several weeks since we last convened, and the market's momentum continues apace. We've obviously, as an agency, gone through some significant changes since we last met, but critically, the commitment to continuing to try to grow this market as quickly and as sustainably as possible remains sacrosanct, and the team is working tirelessly to continue to support this market at this critical phase of its growth. So over the next few minutes, I'd like to do several things. One, provide an update just on the growth trends that we're seeing in the market, talk a little bit specifically about our sustainability related initiatives that we're just kicking off, look at our C numbers, our social economic equity numbers, which I think continue to be a benchmark for the country, and then proceed through to some of the regulatory issues that we want to address in this meeting. So first, I'm excited to announce that, next slide, that we have just crossed the $500 million mark for sales since the market launched. And the last 2 months, June and July, alone brought us to nearly $140 million in revenue. And so the pace at which our monthly sales are growing has been really exciting to see. Just through the first 2 weeks of August, we saw $37 million in sales. And the fact that each month we've seen kind of these sales continue to grow by leaps and bounds has been a heartening sign of the continued transition we see of consumers into the legal market. And as we continue to see sophistication in the consumer within the legal market. Next slide. August saw our first two $18 million weeks, and by the second week of August, we're already over $18.5 million. So the week-over-week change in August at only 2% might not seem significant, but if you consider that it was barely 3 months ago that we were very excited to be crossing $14 million in sales, the velocity is there. And this is the combination of several kind of market growth factors. One is just more stores opening and the velocity at which new stores are opening. We have a combination of our originally licensed cards who are now kind of finally getting the doors open, but we're also starting to see the first cohort of adult use licensed retailers, so folks who applied in the November queue, also getting their doors open. So having more stores open and having more consumers become aware of those stores and go in has been a catalyst for growth. But two, and critically, is our enforcement actions across the state have had a really important impact on retail sales growth. So we've been continuing to monitor the growth of retail sales in jurisdictions where our enforcement activity has been most active. And in the 14 weeks since the enforcement actions began at the beginning of May, in retailers downstate that have been open for more than 12 weeks, we've seen a 100% increase in sales growth since the beginning of the enforcement action. So 14 weeks, we have roughly 24 retailers who, actually more than that, who have seen 100% increase in their sales over that period. A really powerful testament to the outcomes that we have been able to see based on the state's commitment to finally padlocking these unlicensed dispensaries. That commitment will be strong and ongoing. We have been heartened to see that one of the key outcomes here has been that consumers are walking to legal stores saying the place I used to get my legal cannabis has been shut down, so I need a new place, and coming to the legal shops. So very positive momentum there, and a trend that we are excited to continue to see growing. On the next slide, just a quick year-over-year comparison. Last year, full year sales, we did $160 million in sales. This year, we're already close to $370 million. So really cooking with gas here, and these data are through the second week of August. So I'm quite comfortable in thinking that we should be done with, we should clear close to $400 million by the time we get to the end of August, and that puts us in a really strong position as we get into the second or the latter half of 2024. The next slide, we have a quick overview of the distribution of our retailers across the state. And just a couple of points here to kind of think about. One, without any kind of influence from the office, we've been able to maintain pretty good parity between downstate and upstate in terms of the pace at which retail stores are open. So 79 upstate, 86 downstate, certainly not enough, and we're working really to try and unlock the issues that might be delaying or protracting the timeline between licensure and retail store opening. And some of those are issues we're going to be addressing today. But you know, this puts us at roughly 140 doors open since the year began. And we're very keen to see now the second wave of November Q licensees start to launch. So a good pace, but much more still to come. And so for the market update component, I'll close with an announcement about the launch of a new sustainability related initiative that's going to primarily implicate our producers. So sustainability has been central to the work that the office is doing in trying to establish the legal regulated cannabis market. And one of the reasons why sustainability as a macro issue is such a key consideration in this ecosystem is, as a state, as an economy, you very rarely get a chance to build an industry from the ground up and influence the use of resources in that industry from the ground up. We know from research that has been done over the last decade, specifically around cannabis, that cannabis is arguably the most energy intensive crop in our agricultural economy. A driving reason for that is because so much of the cannabis that has been grown was being grown indoors, using low efficiency lighting. And part of the reason so much of it was being grown indoors is because it was illegal and people didn't want to be seen growing it. As we transitioned from illegal to legal regulated markets, people brought the cultivation practices from controlled environments into the legal markets, which was entirely understandable. Those were a lot of master growers perfected their techniques growing under lights. And so it has taken, with the investment that has happened with legalization, we have begun to see real significant transformation in the way cannabis is grown. Just the change from low efficiency lighting to LEDs alone. Over the last decade, we've seen LEDs, which are hyper efficient lighting, really change the way cannabis can be grown at scale indoors while dramatically lowering the energy related footprint. We've seen a huge amount of innovation around things like water reclamation, so that you're not just ensuring that water that is being used to grow the plants isn't being wasted, but you're also capturing and reclaiming the condensate from your dehumidifiers. Amount of opportunity for innovation that not only reduces the environmental footprint of our producers, but also allows for greater efficiency, allows for cost savings. And we view this as really critical to do now before we have thousands of licensees, hundreds of growers all producing across the state. So one of the key components of helping us better understand, manage, and track resource use in our production environments is a tool that we are about to launch called PowerScore. We've worked very closely with our partners at Resource Innovation Institute, a environmental and resource use organization based out of Oregon that really specializes in understanding the use of resources, energy, water, and waste management in controlled environments, to build a tool that our producers will be able to use to track how much electricity they're using, how much water they're using, based on the type of facility they're in, and create benchmarks, establish benchmarks to see how they're doing against their peers, both domestically and across the country. You know, you can't improve what you don't measure, and you can't track what you don't measure. And so the launch of this PowerScore tool will provide critical intelligence, critical insights into how much resources we're using to grow the state cannabis that we're consuming in the state, and help us identify ways in which we as regulators can incentivize folks to be more efficient, but also provide our operators ways for them to identify their opportunities to be more efficient. This is going to be a drawn-out process because, you know, it takes a long, it takes collecting the data over a long period in order to be able to see the performance. So we're going to start this process in September. Look out for an email if you're a producer to be coming from the OCM with instructions to sign up for OCM. We'll collect some demographic information about your facility, and then you'll start submitting your things like your utility bills, or how much energy you're using over the next 12 months. The first reports will be due on August 31st, 2025. So this is not going to be a switch flip. There will be time to get on, there will be time to get oriented, and the data can be done. We're not suggesting you should do this all at the last minute, but if you choose to do that, just keep your records. In August of next year, we'll begin the reporting process to show how folks are doing, to see what we are learning, and really use this as a way to align the broader growth of the industry with the state's very aggressive sustainability initiatives. So much more on this to come over the next couple of weeks. This is just one of several important sustainability initiatives that we're kicking off. But wanted to make sure that our CAB was aware that this was coming down the pike. And before we pivot to the C numbers, I'm happy to take any questions about the market update and Power Score.
I have a couple questions on Power Score, John. Right now, there was a thing in the regs about our sustainability program and sustainability plans. Is that related to Power Score? Because part of submitting the sustainability plan was then you could do a loyalty program. I'm curious if those two things are tied together.
So they are related in that they're part of just the broad umbrella of ways in which we're trying to incentivize more sustainable practices. But the sustainability plan is really distinct from Power Score. Power Score is just a kind of regulated requirement, or it is a requirement that we are having our licensees submit, partly because we want to be able to track this information. We want to be able to do this benchmarking and understand how we're performing against other sectors in the economy. But I would view this as distinct from the sustainability initiatives. However, if the data from the Power Score helps you kind of refine or adjust your sustainability plan, then I think that would be great.
Okay, then the second question on the Power Score program. Can everyone hear me?
Okay.
You want to talk? Okay, sorry about that. All right, this is better.
I don't think it's on.
All right, well,
That'll help. Okay, there we go. All right, then the next question, John, on the Power Score program, you know, in other industries like organic vegetables, for example, you have to prove you're organic, similar to this, and then you could use the seal on your packaging. Are you envisioning that if people get a certain score, minimum score, let's say on this Power Score thing, that there's going to be some kind of label claim to be made on packaging, like this is Power Scored 100, or because we have a similar carve out for craft right now that we're still working on the definition for. So I'm just curious, like, is the goal here to do the similar for a sustainable product?
So I love that question, and it's really reflective of kind of some of the options that I think lie ahead for this market as we grow. Including how do you identify the best performers in the market within a range of areas. You know, the craft issue is one that has been an ongoing discussion. How do we define craft and how will that be used potentially as a label in our packaging moving forward? We hadn't necessarily yet built a plan for delineating our most resource efficient producers versus those who might be still those who might still have opportunities for improvement. However, certainly I think that that's something that we can put on the table and I think would be quite of interest. We don't necessarily want this to be punitive. The intent here is to provide feedback, insights, and opportunity for people to learn how to do better, how to be more resource efficient. But you know, if we can have the lead certified version of our producers, particularly for our controlled environment producers, we would certainly be open to exploring that.
Cool, thanks.
Alejandro, did you have a comment or question? You're
Yes, I do. Hello, do you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So I heard great information. Thank you for all this happening. This is wonderful. So one of my questions was you mentioned benchmarking. You know, currently in New York City, we have local law 87, where it's a need for commercial buildings and buildings in general to get benchmarked. I bring this up just because I think there is great incentives or motivation, better yet, for people to in essence compete to lower their carbon footprint. But is there going to be, like in the New York City local law 87, anything that's going to be coupled with utility incentives to actually lower the cost to actually get these things done, and or also working with the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, NYSERDA, to also couple that to do these energy audits and being able to actually create these reports? Is there going to be any type of, I guess, collaboration to take the next step after they do this assessment, or better yet, the energy audit through Power Score, to help these cultivators be able to, again, become more energy efficient. And again, and obviously not have to carry that initial burden of investment to do so, right? So is there going to be anything in partnership with the utility companies and or again, NYSERDA?
Thank you for the question, Alejandro. Great question. And I'm actually thrilled to say that NYSERDA have been unbelievable partners through the development of not just the PowerScore initiative, but more broadly, the work we've been doing across our sustainability considerations. They've really helped sharpen our thinking about how we can do this in a way that minimizes the burden on our producers, but kind of steers everyone toward better outcomes. Specifically to the question around the working with utilities, those are conversations that are just beginning. And I think the PowerScore data is actually going to be really valuable to inform those discussions. This is all happening in real time. And so for utilities who might be thinking about things like potential incentives, understanding the scale of footprint, the scale of impact becomes a really meaningful way for them to now assess what the best opportunities for incentives, for collaboration, for education might be. So we think the feedback from PowerScore is going to be a really important input to helping us identify the ways in which we can build these incentives and advance these programs. But absolutely, NYSERDA in particular has been an incredible partner so far, and we very much look forward to continuing to work with them through this process.
And I just wanted to jump into, because Alejandro, that's such a great point, and kind of reiterate the statement John made earlier, which is the importance of this benchmarking in the fact that we are coming from this previous market that was, underground, not tracked, even early medical programs in a lot of other states were really just about access. It wasn't about, applying some of these other regulations that we applied to other industries. And so John and I in the office, we're all part of a Cannabis Regulators Association, and energy and sustainability is a big topic there. And it's actually a topic where not a lot of states have made a ton of progress. Massachusetts has a great pilot program going on. Oregon and some of the Western states have some started getting things going. But New York actually has an opportunity to be a leader here, and using things like PowerScore is a way to get there, because this data just hasn't been tracked before. It's indoor agriculture a lot of the time in a different kind of way than any other indoor agriculture is done. So it's novel, but it's going to be super helpful as we plan our programming in the future.
Thank you for that. Just one extra question I have, I guess. Has there also then been conversations with engineering firms such as Willdan, for example, that have been doing this type of work with NYSERDA that are already approved contractors or program managers to do this work, and having conversations potentially with engineering firms to pick their brains, see what hardships they might have, had in other industries, and also, in a sense, seeing how they're also going to participate as we start rolling out these sustainability plans, because I'm assuming since they've been the firms that have been doing this for the last 10 to plus years, how they're going to be incorporated into the rollout of these things. And also, again, because they already have the experience on filling out the applications and getting all these incentive dollars for the other current markets that are available. I'm sure cultivators are going to also have a hard time not just meeting the sustainability goals, but if, again, they want to get these energy conservation measures implemented, they're going to have to do some application work and stuff like that. So usually, again, working with engineering firms, they take that burden off their clients and they do it themselves. So is there any conversations with them to actually, get these, once the rollout starts happening and these implementation projects start happening, having them involved in the conversation?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that. We've actually, in addition to the kind of knowledge sharing that we've done with partners like NYSERDA, DEC, and some of these deeply experienced consultants, as well as engineering firms, material equipment producers. Like there's a lot of diligence that has gone through to try and sharpen the office's kind of intelligence on how to do this in a way that improves outcomes, while really being kind of minimally intrusive into the way our producers operate. So these conversations, this is going to be a long-term process. The industry is literally evolving before our eyes. And so I don't view these as being static conversations, but really kind of a dialogue that will have a feedback loop, that as new innovations are happening, as people are developing new practices, as people are seeing results from kind of deploying A/B tests, et cetera, that will be learning that and disseminating it out. But those conversations have started and will be ongoing. Two, I think to your point about the role in which subject matter experts can play in helping folks get smart. There's a lot of information out there already to help folks kind of get oriented to the issues related to improving the efficiency of your operations. Some great resources out there that already exist. And while we are starting with PowerScore as kind of our most visible first major initiative specifically related to sustainability, I will just say as a broad statement to all of our licensees, as you see opportunities to advance sustainability within your businesses to drive great outcomes, please, get creative, share that feedback with us. I think this is one of the real areas where there's a real opportunity to drive meaningful, not just impact to New York, but meaningful impact in cannabis nationally, given the model that New York can set. So 2 quick points. To learn more specifically about, to learn more about the broad sustainability initiatives that we're undertaking here, you can go to a new website that we've just launched, cannabis.ny.gov/sustainability, that houses a lot of insights into the broad mandate of sustainability work that we're doing. And then specifically for PowerScore, for our licensees, there's no cost for this. The state is assuming the cost for this. So, but to learn more about the PowerScore program specifically, cannabispowerscore.org/New York will take you to a dedicated website to a dedicated microsite that we've built in partnership with RII, Resource Innovation Institute.
Okay. Before we turn it over to Tabitha Robinson for our social and economic equity update, just following on Alejandro's point, Ashley Southall did a piece today in the New York Times about the cost of products at the legal dispensaries, and I think it's a good reminder for all of us in these roles at CAB and OCM and CCB about balancing requirements on licensees without driving up the cost too much. So obviously we all want energy and environmental sustainability. We want our agricultural licensees to do whatever they can, but I just think we always also have to keep in the back of our minds there's a cost to all of these things, and it's ultimately passed on to the consumer. And if we want the market to succeed, we have to be very sensitive to that, as well as our, all of these other goals that we have. So, and I know that you are, I'm just reiterating the point.
Really important point. And that's part of the reason why we're thinking about PowerScore and the insights we'll gain from it as a way to create a tide that lifts all boats, rather than that will create directives that people need to go and spend money to implement. We know we already have some producers who are really at the very bleeding edge of kind of high efficiency operations, and there's some who are still kind of figuring out their path there. We're literally, we're very intentional, very conscious about trying to keep the cost down, just because we know this is already a high cost state to operate in. And we certainly wouldn't want the cost of this very important outcome to make the market less competitive against the very active, unregulated market that we know doesn't do any of these things. So there's definitely a balance there that will will continue to pay very close attention to.
All right.
Can I ask just one last question? Sorry, and it came up. Would it be possible for us to create a subcommittee for sustainability? Because I think this is a very extremely important topic, and there's a lot of moving pieces. And as I heard everybody speak already about this, I think a lot of us do see this as something of importance. And I think it would be great if we could have a little bit of input as an advisory board members to guide some of this and hopefully even bring resources that may be needed.
Okay, consider it created, and you are now chair, Alejandro. So, I'm volunteering Alan and Pete Schaefer to be members.
Great.
Well, I do have to just shout out Pete and the packaging at Nanticoke, compostable packaging, really a model of the types of opportunities for sustainability and innovation in the space. So, and I'm sure our sustainability team is going to be elated to hear that they have a CAB subcommittee now. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I want to thank SUNY so much for letting us continue to use their facilities. As many of you know, I've been on the SUNY Board of Trustees for close to 15 years now. I'm a Governor Patterson appointee to the SUNY board. And there is a lot of sustainability work going on at SUNY that if OCM is not connected to, they probably should be, because literally some of the leading work in the country with respect to universities and other government agencies is going on right now at SUNY. There's a significant working group and some high level people. So if I can help make that connection or introduction, it probably might help OCM's knowledge base about it.
That'd be great.
So, all right. So I am hoping Tabitha will join us.
Unfortunately, she is out of.
Oh, there she is. She's joining us. And
Take it back.
I also want to just acknowledge CAB member Ebro Darden, who chairs our Social and Economic Equity Committee, who's also joining us via live stream. And I'm going to turn it over to Tabitha for an update.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Next slide, please. So today I'll be informing you of our numbers. As you know, we collect this each time that we roll out the issuance of our AU licenses. We're very proud to report that we remain ahead of the statutory goal in terms of our C licensing. Section 87 of the MRTA creates a statutory goal of 50%. 50% of the adult use licenses. We're at 53%. So 53% of those adult use licenses are C owned. And here we have the breakdown by the various C categories. So as you can see, women-owned businesses retain the highest of that C distribution at 41%. Minority-owned businesses not too far behind with 37%. Those two categories are often neck and neck in terms of representation amongst this pool. Next, we have our service-disabled veteran-owned businesses at 9%, distressed farmers also at 9%, and CDIs at 4%. To date, the Cannabis Control Board has issued over 700 adult use licenses, and well over 360 of those are social and economic equity. You know, we usually talk about who owns C, who are the various categories, what's their representation like, but we also wanted to provide some context around the licenses that our C licensees hold. Where do they find themselves mostly? What part of the supply chain do we see them performing in? And there's overwhelming representation amongst our adult use retail dispensary license. We're at 84%. Next, that's followed by the micro business at 54%. This means that 54% of our micro businesses are held by C licensees. Now, if you recall, the micro business license does have a retail option. And that retail option accounts for about a third of our micro business licenses. So it's really quite fascinating. The C representation is gravitating more towards micro and retail. We also see similar trends in other states. So we recognize this may not be a uniquely New York experience, that this is also a gravitational pull within other cannabis markets. Now, the cultivator number and the processor numbers, 38% and 33% respectively, we expect those numbers to increase as we continue to transition our AUCCs and AUCPs over to the adult use side. A lot of our AUCCs, for example, qualify as distressed farmers. So as we continue with that rollover, we expect those numbers to increase.
Cultivator and processor numbers broken down by minorities and women.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you're putting up a percentage for C for 38% cultivators and 33% processors. And my question is, do you have them broken down by category?
By category. No, at this time we don't, but we can pull that data for you.
Okay, I think that would be useful because one of the questions that I get a lot is about the diversity of the cultivators and the processors. And I think there's significant concern that it's not diverse enough and we're not doing enough to try to create more opportunities there. So I think it would be helpful for us to see that broken down.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Well, I do think, Chairman Belloc, I think we need to be direct to, now that we're entering this phase, money's being made and licenses are out and taxes are being collected. I think we need to also be more specific. You know, the Black and brown communities in the state of New York were the ones most criminalized by drug laws in the state. And so when we look at these numbers, and, you know, I appreciate that we are pacing ahead, but how much of them are specifically Black and brown? Because that will be the talking point as we move forward into the future for many communities. Because when this whole thing rolled out, you know, and when we talk about grants and things like that, we'll get more into that. But the Black and brown communities have been the most criminalized. And so I think we need to keep an eye on that number, because the critique will come, as you're pointing out, Joe Bullock, how much are we doing to make sure those communities are being served?
Yeah, those are all great points. Yeah, we can look into the data. It's just not something that I have access to right now, but we can.
Yeah, and Tabitha, yes, for sure. I'm just suggesting we need to be proactive, even if the numbers aren't good, because there could be other reasons that they're not good. They don't know what's available to them. They're not familiar with this space. Can we create programs to help people get more familiar? Can we create long-term goals and sustainable goals as this business grows and these opportunities present themselves?
Definitely. Next slide, please. Earlier this month, we have continued with our accelerator program. If you recall, in the spring of last year, we first launched our accelerator program in partnership with our academy, which is a 501c3 that specializes in cannabis education, specifically amongst retail licensees. And we are continuing this program, especially now, given the rollout of our adult use licenses. In order to be eligible to participate in this program, you must be a licensee. You must be either card or social and economic equity, and specifically retail. Now, spots are not guaranteed. So for those licensees who are interested, they must fill out an enrollment form. That form was sent out earlier this month as well. But if anyone should have any questions or request the form again, you can email us any of the OCM email addresses, but especially the CE email, which is see@ocm.ny.gov. The program was launched on August 8th, and we had pretty good attendance from our licensees. Over 92% of survey respondents said that they were extremely likely to recommend this program and to share it with their fellow business partners. We're really lucky to provide this resource to our licensees because they're getting a number of resources within this program, including live weekly and recorded online courses every Tuesday at 5 p.m. That those courses will go over various materials, including how to efficiently and compliantly operate dispensaries, best practices around fundraising, tax planning, New York State labor laws. Licensees are also getting access to performance, to create their performance, which we know is a huge resource in order to provide our licensees with the materials they need to fundraise, to project their financial health, and to really use that as a marketing tool as they grow their business. There are weekly office hours and technical assistance provided every Thursday. This is a really key component of this education program because a lot of the learning will come from engagement with mentors. And these are mentors who have cannabis dispensaries around the country as owners or as managers. So they really have that boots on the ground experience that we're hoping our licensees can gain from them. And then peer-to-peer support, right? This is an opportunity also for licensees to engage with each other, to share their experiences and learn best practices that have worked from one to the other. Any questions on this one?
So I have a related question. And Tabitha, I'm not sure it's appropriately directed to you, but it may be. So if it isn't, maybe Pat or John could address it. But one of the things that I'm hearing about a lot from people are the incubators. I think if you look at the MRTA, this is one of the shalls, not a might or a may. It's one of the required ones that we're supposed to be doing. And there's I guess, strong feeling out there that some of our licensees are not getting to take advantage of the incubators because we haven't set them up yet. So is there any update on the incubators and what the status is, and do we have a plan for it?
I can provide some information on that, and John
Excellent.
and Pat, feel free to chime in as well. As you know, the MRTA says that there shall be an incubator, and in general, there's a broader education component. This accelerator is part of that broader education component, which is how we think about incubation. Additionally, we do have a RFA in the works to get these incubators up and running on a more localized level to really serve as a local or regional hub that licensees and hopeful applicants can attend and get that sort of direct support. That is a process that requires a significant amount of red tape and approval from the various state agencies. So as we work to build out that larger program, we have developed the various educational programs, including this accelerator program, including our CHIP Academy, which ran for about 4 months earlier this year and just closed at the end of July. And that was available to all licensees. The content from that programming is on our website very soon. And that was conducted in partnership with Cornell University and SUNY Morrisville. So there have been a number of educational initiatives that we've been rolling out. And still, we're working to provide that more direct services, time permitting with the various procedural obligations we have.
So can I just ask a question then? The Chip Academy is different than an incubator? Is that, because the Chip Academy was pretty expensive, at least on the supply side. Like that was a lot of classes, a lot of work, ton of topics. It's a fantastic resource. Is there supposed to be another program? Yeah.
Sure, that's a great question. The way we think about it is that all of these educational initiatives are under incubation, right? They're all education that we're providing to our licensees. The goal is to meet licensees where they are and given their needs. So we hope to have, various sort of fields met. So the Chip Academy was one that very much touched supply chain. Our academy, the one accelerator that that's on the screen right now, focuses specifically on retail. We'll have a broader one to cover applicants as well. So we think about it as sort of a broad mandate in the statute. And we try to fill it as best as we can with various programs filling various needs.
I mean, I don't mean to over lawyer this, but I am a lawyer, okay? And if the statute says there's supposed to be an incubator, and this is the incubator, we should call it an incubator and not an accelerator, because, it's not if you have social and economic equity goals, it's not enough just to give people a license. You have to give them the tools and resources to be successful. So there's a reason why that was in the statute, which, I know, Pat, you're obviously very familiar with the language in the statute, and it just, if I'm getting more than one phone call from somebody saying, why don't we have an incubator? Our licensees are suffering because there's not an incubator. We need to have an incubator.
So
So,
it sounds
I
like
think-
the point. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, please go ahead.
It sounds like one of the points you're making, Chair, is how the terminology we use to market our programming. Right?
Definitely.
As I've explained, the programming exists. But if there's a concern on how we market it, and what sort of terminology we use to communicate with licensees so they understand and the bells go off that this is the thing you've been waiting for. That is a conversation we'd be more than likely to have with our comms team and also with our counsel, right? With our legal team, making sure that as we do this marketing, as we do this messaging, we are communicating in a way that is adherent to the statute.
Yeah. I mean, again, not to over lawyer this, but if you look at what's happened, whether it's the sheriff in New York City or things that OCM hasn't been involved in litigation, it's all fine for us to sit around and say, we're going to do it this way or that way. But when you get in front of a judge, the judge is going to say, listen, it's supposed to look like this. You're supposed to follow this process. And if you don't, you're going to have a problem. And that's literally what just happened with the sheriff. Obviously, we don't control the sheriff, but, I think the judge in that case was pretty clear, which is, if you're going to go around and shut down these businesses, you got to do it properly. There has to be a process, a procedure, due process. And I think some of the judges in our cases have sort of reacted the same way. And it's not purposeful, but I do think this incubator thing is a hot topic. I'm just saying, again, if I'm getting multiple phone calls with people using the word incubator, people are focused on it, and we, and for good reason, I think. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point.
It's a really important point, and I don't want to belabor it, but I would say maybe a point to both applicants, other stakeholders, and licensees specifically. One, as Tabitha mentioned, and I think a really important point to understand, that as a young agency that's still quite resource constrained, establishing an incubator in the sense that I think most people are expecting in terms of physical building, perhaps several of them across the state where you can go in and get your classes and training, that's a really resource intensive process. And so all of that has been ongoing for a while. It just takes a while to get through all of the administrative requirements to actually build that sort of facility, but that is ongoing. But I hope our stakeholders don't think that just because we are not at that point of having a space as beautiful as this one, in which we can be having classes daily, that we don't yet have resources available that can help you start really thinking deeply and intentionally about how to optimize your business. There's an incredible amount of content that's been created through our academy, through the CHIP program, through the sustainability webinars that we've done. And all of this is already on the website. All of this is readily available at your convenience. So the incubators are absolutely coming, and we can remain deeply committed to that. But I hope that doesn't kind of preclude the appreciation for how much is already available from subject matter experts that we've been able to marshal from across the space.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I assume the CHIP Academy was the incubator. That's what I always saw it as, that.
Yeah.
So just you're calling it something different, maybe.
Yep.
Just, but to Joe's point, that's not going to hold up in a court.
Virtual.
Yeah, right. It's a virtual incubator. Right.
Anyone can talk to Brian Farmer if they want.
And they do.
And
All
I
right.
also want to flag, Joe, as you mentioned, process and what the statute requires. If, as you look across these various programs that we're providing under the broader incubator umbrella, and if you see that there are any processes we might be missing or not adequately covering, we definitely welcome that conversation from the members of CAB to make sure that we are fulfilling any process requirements related to incubation.
Okay. Anything else in the social and economic equity update?
Next slide, please. In this slide, I'm previewing a survey that's coming out later this week. This is a survey collecting market research amongst our C licensees related to the C logo. As you all may remember, in the social and economic plan that was released in May of 2023, the plan called for a C logo. The logo is outlined here on the left of the screen, and it is envisioned as a marketing logo that will be made available to all of our C licensees. We like to think of it in the vein of organic or fair trade. When you see these market symbols, they mean something, right? They often drive demand and consumer preferences in ways that we want to attach to our businesses. We have a survey that will be released shortly, available to licensees, so please look out for that. And that survey seeks to gain more direct information from our licensees. We really want to make sure that we are not building this program around our own assumptions as regulators, but that is driven by data that we receive from our stakeholders. So we're asking questions to gauge the interest in the use of this logo, to hear directly from licensees how they plan to display it and where they plan to display it. Is this a logo that they envision only on product? Or is this a logo that they might, for example, put on a business card or on a storefront or on the side of a truck as it's conducting its distribution deliveries? And we want to know how this may fit into other marketing efforts that they have going on. So this survey is coming out in a couple days, and it's just one step as we move further in the process of releasing the C logo campaign.
Great.
All right, if there are no further questions, thank you all for your time, and I will pass it back to John.
Okay. Ebro, did you have anything else you wanted to add or ask?
Nope, all good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we are moving to our community reinvestment program update, which we're very excited about. Catherine.
I have an update, you can hit the next slide. So as we all know, since the last subcommittee meeting, we worked to incorporate the framework for folks who might be tuning in for the first time, or it's been a while. At the last subcommittee meeting, it was decided to fund 501c3 community-based organizations or nonprofits, and to focus on 3 priority areas, which is workforce, housing, and mental health, specifically for young people between the ages of 0 and 24. And since then, our team's been working really diligently with the office of our ITS team and their contractor Agate to develop an online grant platform called Telegram or IGX, as we say. And so on IGX, folks will be able to submit their grant applications, but will also be able to, really quickly review, analyze full data reports from this platform. So it's been a really easy entire grant life cycle compared to what at the last subcommittee we thought we would originally be doing. So we've been working really closely with the team there. And so that'll be one platform, and folks will still have to be pre-qualified on SFS. And that is a process that any 50. Okay.
Repeat of anything.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry about
Sorry. No, it's okay. I'll keep going. And if anything, I can just repeat back for folks on Zoom. So that's a process. So folks will be able to do this right on IGX on the digital platform that we're building. So still have to be pre-registered or pre-qualified, on SFS. And that is a process that 501c3 orgs who are interested in the fund or applying for the fund can start today. So, yeah, any questions?
Nope, I just wanted to say thank you to the governor's office, and under their leadership, we've had tremendous help from the Office of General Services, the Office of Information Technology, and also the Controller's Office in helping us get this across the finish line. And it's not something we could do without their partnership. And just want to extend our thanks. And everything I hear from Catherine and Lila and everyone else is that all of those agencies are working very generously and in partnership with us to help us with it, the technology and the granting and everything else. So
Perfect. Thank you.
all right,
Several questions.
Alejandro.
Yes, hello. So yeah, I have a question around the workforce development component. I guess we're using a cookie cutter approach of what the approach has always been in doing workforce, that usually resources are only available to 17 to 24-year-olds. But being that this is such an industry that's been around for such a long time, and I mean, it began obviously with the legacy applicants, right? But there's also people that are over 24 that are really eager and interested in getting into this space. Is there an opportunity to rediscuss that limitation of the 17 to 24 mark? I understand that tends to be, again, a lot of the federal grants and things of that sense usually just focus on those age ranges, but we're going to be missing a huge demographic of individuals that again might have been impacted by the war on drugs as well, and or been in the space for a long time, and again they would be in essence eliminated from the opportunity of being trained up. And also, I think I was going to ask, and I think I brought this up last time, of the hyper focus on just working with nonprofits. There's, I think, a lot of change now recently with social enterprises that are for profit, that do a lot of community work, that again would be limited to have to work with nonprofits. Let's say that has happened in the past where nonprofits have to apply and they just get to, in essence, gain what like the 10% to 20% admin fee, and they still sub it out to a for-profit company that ends up pretty much doing all the work at an 80% discount, because they have to the nonprofit has to take their admin fee in order for these programs to work. So is there going to be any potential flexibility around this, or research done on companies that are out there doing this type of work that may not necessarily be for profits as well? And then again, the limitation on the age range of the 17 to 24-year-olds, is there any flexibility on potentially increasing that age range to be able to capture a much larger demographic?
Lila, did you want to comment on that? Or?
Hi, everyone. Sorry to be joining remotely. I couldn't make it today, but Lila Hunt, Deputy Director of Public Health and Campaigns. And thank you for both of those questions, Alejandro. I'll take them one at a time. Your first question was about the age range and focus. So first, just clarifying, it's a bit broader than what you had mentioned, which was 17 to 24. So per CAB vote at the last Cannabis Advisory Board Community Grants Reinvestment Fund Subcommittee meeting, members coalesced around 0 to 24 for this first grant cycle. So it's broader. I think that will help drive not just for workforce development, for the other areas of focus as well, sort of more broad programming that will involve and potentially engage more community-based organizations who could then be eligible for this funding, especially as we're looking at mental health services for young people. I think that the broader evidence-based range of 0 to 24 for this first cycle is great. The second point you mentioned around 501c3 organizations, at the last community grants reinvestment fund subcommittee meeting, there was good engagement from the members, both leading up to and at that subcommittee meeting, where there seemed to be good coalition and support for 501c3 organizations for this round. I think several of the members flagged that they wanted to further explore what organizations, what entities would be eligible to receive funding for future rounds. And I think that is, an important area of focus for this first year. I also wanted to flag, I heard you mention sort of community engagement to start to build coalition around some of the organizations that are eligible for this funding. And to that end, our external affairs group, we've sent communications in this regard to the CAB members, have been out in the community and engaging with potential organizations that might be eligible for this funding. So we've been building up a bit of a Rolodex there in order to help make sure that folks are aware. I think, this is a new agency, a new award, and so there will be, continued need to build coalition with the community-based organizations that will be eligible. And actually, we received a question in the chat from Nikki and another Cannabis Advisory Board member who chimed in and said, how can we help amplify the opportunity for organizations? And so to all CAB members, there will be a one-pager coming soon for you all. We're looking to support and have opportunities for amplifying this opportunity for community-based organizations. We really want to make sure folks are aware of this grant funding opportunity. And we'll also be building out a website or webpage on our website rather to help advertise and drive folks to answer questions. As Kathy mentioned, we're building out this grants application system. And so we'll have some virtual resources there, some supports there, and also pointing to the many resources that are available to folks on the SFS website to help support that pre-qualification component, just to make sure that we have the technical assistance needed in that regard.
Okay, and I think Gary Johnson has a comment or question. And I know that Dr. Chin wants to comment, and Ebro, we see that you have a comment, so we'll get to everybody. And Gary, why don't you start, and then
Thank you, Chair.
work our way around.
Lila, I just wanted to ask, did we make that determination that it was only 501c3s? I know we had some discussion on 501c4s as well.
We did. We made that determination that just for this round, it would be limited to 501c3s, and for the next future rounds, we're going to have a discussion about your suggestion on the 501c4s and also Sarah's suggestion about government entities. So we have not foreclosed those options, and it will be part of the conversation going forward.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Chin?
Lila already answered.
Okay. Ebro?
First on the 501c4 thing, if somebody can provide me with insight on why it would be useful to include 501c4s. I know we're going to discuss that in the future, but I haven't really found anything that seems beneficial, but anybody that can share anything would be great. My next question would be, in our last meeting, we discussed the reality that receiving funds from New York State is usually done in a reimbursement fashion. And I know there was discussion about trying to figure out how we're going to get around those rules or figure out a new solution, because obviously many organizations will want to give grants to. may not be able to even participate if it's on reimbursement. Is there any update there?
For your second question first, Ebro. So your second question was about the reimbursement model. And in New York State, with procurement law, the maximum that we're allowed to give in advance is a 25% advance payment. So that per CAB member feedback is currently in our RFA. We've been working with and supported by Sue Filburn. She introduced herself at the last Cannabis Advisory Board. She's our new Chief Administration Officer, and she's helping connect us to understand with the Office of State Comptroller and some of the other more procedural offices who do procurement on a regular basis. What are the rules and parameters? So we're operating now, what's in the draft, Ebro, to your point, is the maximum that's allowable according to New York State finance and procurement laws.
Gary, did you want to say anything about the 501c4s now, or should we do that in the
I can
future?
provide that information.
Okay, all right. All right, anything else about the reinvestment fund? Okay, thank you. And Lila, thank you. And I do just want to acknowledge everything you've been doing for the CAB, which goes well beyond this reinvestment fund. And you have effectively been serving as our person at OCM and helping organize the meetings and communications. And it's very deeply appreciated. And I'm sure I'll be fighting with Pat if you're ever going to get relieved.
Not anytime soon.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so now we are going to move to our exciting part of the meeting, which is our regulatory discussion related to PLMA and the public convenience regulations. And I'm going to turn it back to John to lay the groundwork, and then we'll invite any CAB members who want to comment or provide feedback on these. And just so everybody is clear, Lila is going to be taking notes and using the transcript of this meeting to memorialize what you say about the PLMA and public convenience, and then transmit them after letting us review them to the CCB, so that there will be an actual communication from the CAB to the CCB. So she's going to be doing that now, and then she'll circulate to us what she's going to send before it's actually sent. So,
Joe, I just want to, maybe I reverse my statement just for the record, since everything is being transcribed. I think I would like to enter for the record what a 501c4 is.
yeah,
So
sure,
we can do
please.
that. So this is for Ebro and everyone else. A 501c4 is a nonprofit organization as well. The difference is the status in terms of their receiving funds that are not tax deductible. So they receive grants, they receive donations, it's just not directly tax deductible. And oftentimes a 501c4 is a local entity that is under the umbrella of a national or a state 501c3. So they operate semi-independently, but they are not tax deductible. That's the only difference.
Okay.
Well, I think we should add in there that they can also participate in political lobbying, which is why I have a problem with it.
No, they can't.
That's a
Sure about
C6.
that?
I'm absolutely positive about that.
Okay.
I think you're thinking of a 501c6 that can
Correct.
participate in public lobbying.
Okay.
Question from Sam Barrett.
All right, John?
A question from Sam Barrett.
Not again, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll begin the regulatory discussion with with our packaging, labeling, marketing, and advertising regulations. By way of orienting context, on July 10th, the Cannabis Control Board approved amendments to our packaging, labeling, marketing, and advertising rules, which were originally adopted in March 2023. These amendments, and they are substantial, aim to alleviate the burden on licensees while maintaining rules that ensure our continued commitment to product safety, to quality of cannabis products, to informing consumers, and to protect against packaging, labeling, marketing, and advertising of cannabis products in a way that would be attractive to individuals under the age of 21. Next slide. Many of the changes that we've made to Part 28 of the PLMA have been made to clarify the provisions, codify some of the changes that have been previously only implemented through guidance, and to streamline kind of OCM operations by reducing things that we've been finding that are common causes of our compliance unit issuing statements of findings against our licensees, when the things that we're finding as issues really aren't major threats to public health and safety. So since the packaging and labeling regulations were first adopted, the medical cannabis programs now point to the new PLMA, the new Part 128. And so part of what we're trying to do here is harmonize our rules for packaging and labeling between the medical and adult use programs. We're not running two parallel types of regulations. Our revisions also reflect changes to the definition of what attractive to individuals under the age of 21 actually means, and incorporates best practices that we've learned from the tobacco control and the tobacco settlements. So part of what we've done here that I think is quite meaningful is we've removed our prohibitions on things like the bright colors. You remember in our original PLMA, we required that the colors be more muted. We had prohibition against kind of neon colors. That's gone away. We've also removed things like the prohibitions on bubble fonts. We're getting a lot of questions around, does this qualify as a bubble font versus not? I'm like, we don't need to adjudicate this. It's not improving public health. So that's one of the proposed changes here. Another notable change included in our proposed regulations are the removals on prohibitions around promotion of price reductions, discounts, or loyalty programs. This is certainly going to be an important part of the conversation that we have here today. Part of what led to the consideration of this specific change to the PLMA is part of the feedback that we've been receiving literally since the program launched, of retailers having a lot of trouble managing their inventory or being challenged in the efficiency with which they can manage the inventory. The kind of blanket prohibition on deals, discounts, price promotions meant that if you had a slow-moving product in your inventory, you couldn't just discount that one specific product. So, the amended regulations propose a fairly broad latitude for our licensees on how they use deals, discounts, and loyalty programs. Certainly a point that we're receiving quite a lot of feedback on, and we will be taking that into consideration. Finally, and importantly, circling back to our sustainability initiatives, the proposed regulations also include some changes to the rules around the use of single-use plastics and set minimum standards for having post-consumer recycled material in our packaging. Why is this important? Was trying to think about how to provide context on the urgency of us starting to get ahead of this. And I've talked about this in other contexts. I'll just reiterate, I call it the cannabis equivalent of the Keurig K-Cup problem. A product that is very efficient, very convenient for consumers to use, pop it into the brewing machine and then throw it in the trash can, but it's completely unrecyclable. No one yet has found a way to take apart a K-Cup, at least that I've seen recently, a K-Cup, separating the plastic from the foil lid, from the fiber netting that holds the coffee grounds, and dispose of them in a way that can promote sustainability. So most of the K-Cups that we use end up in a landfill. With cannabis, we're trying to get ahead of these issues, try and prevent the cannabis equivalent of a K-Cup problem. And by way of context, I ran some numbers yesterday looking at just how many single gram, single pre-roll tubes we have sold since this market launched. We've sold over 2 million pre-roll tubes since the market launched. 2.5 million 3.5 gram cannabis product packages. we really need to start thinking about how to make our products sustainable, given that we are only at 165 stores so far. So this is the first step. This is not going to happen overnight. Including post-recycled materials is an important part of it. But this is going to be an ongoing effort for us to think about how we can continue to ensure that consumers have convenient access to these products, but we don't create a post-consumer waste stream that really has a very long-term impact on our environment. So the post-consumer waste requirement, 25% post-consumer material in packaging, will be phased in. You'll have 12 months or up through your renewal period, depending on when you got licensed to comply. This, Alan, will fit into the sustainability plan as one of the elements. But a timely moment to remind folks that we are thinking about sustainability very holistically in this market. Next slide, please. So the second part of PLMA specifically relates to marketing and advertising. And we've made here again some important proposed changes to our marketing and advertising rules. And part of what has informed our thinking is we certainly want to ensure that we enable our licensed operators to be able to compete against the illicit market, which remains very active, very vibrant in the state of New York. And so inhibiting that competition negatively impacts the growth of the legal market. So included in these changes is we're proposing revisions to audience composition thresholds. So that digital ads, you can use digital ads, but those digital ads have to be targeted to audiences that are 21 years or over and be sent on platforms that allow you to do that filtering. We've also said that all other advertisements can be disseminated to audiences based on the composition of the state that is 21 or over. So currently, roughly 75.5% of the state's population is 21 or over. And so you would be able to advertise in environments where you have a fair degree of certainty that the audience meets that 75% threshold. This makes it much easier for folks to identify where you can advertise because it basically mirrors the general state population. The previous threshold, over 90%, meant that there were far fewer places where you would be able to do this, largely adult-only environments. And so this, we think, is going to be a really meaningful change here. We've removed the prohibition, as I've said, on advertising and advertisements that promote price reductions, discounts, customer loyalty programs, or coupons. So again, just giving folks a little bit more clarity, a little more flexibility on how you can advertise. And then for our retailers, some really meaningful changes on outdoor signage. We've heard from our retailers, particularly folks who might be, say, on a streetway or on an avenue that might be a little bit recessed, that if your signs have to be affixed to your building, it can be quite difficult for folks to see you. So we've proposed a couple of substantial changes. One is that we've removed the limit on the number of signs you can have that are affixed to your property. Two, we've also given you the option of having up to 3 signs that are not affixed to your property. So you can have cheese boards, sandwich boards. Sometimes cheese. You can have sandwich boards outside on your sidewalks. You can have signs, say, on the entryway or the driveway into your location, just really trying to facilitate visibility so that folks can see you as they're driving by. And I think a final important one is around billboards. So we know that particularly upstate folks have been having trouble being seen or having trouble being having consumers who are in the area know that these people are in these communities, and particularly given that we are still so early in this. We have adjusted or amended our regulations specifically around billboards that will enable our retailers to use billboards. These are not necessarily advertisements, but they're intended to be informational, allowing the licensees to have their name, their logo, address, contact information, and directions if needed, just so that if you're driving down a highway, you're going through a beacon, you have the sign there, you can have folks know where you are located. So really trying to, through these proposed regulations, provide an avenue for our companies across our supply chain to more readily build brand awareness, engage consumers, build visibility, and critically compete meaningfully against the illicit market while continuing to be singularly focused on where our highest concerns are specifically related to public health and safety.
You can't cite Beacon as an example unless you're going to help them get a dispensary, John. Okay? Just saying.
John,
We're working on that too.
Gary.
two quick questions for you. One, in terms of your signage requirements or regulations still have to comply with local codes and ordinances, correct?
Yes.
So which takes precedence, local code and ordinance? In terms of projection, lighting, illumination, things of that nature, your local code takes precedence over these regulations. Okay. Second, in terms of sustainability, have you been also considering the effects of logistics in your sustainability plans? I mean, it's great to talk about post-consumer waste, but what happens to the this industry? Is that part of the construct?
So we haven't yet built kind of robust regulations specifically around or guidance around the logistics component of the market. Certainly the logistics questions informed our thinking around everything from distribution authorizations. How can we allow product to move most efficiently across the state? It informed our thinking around things like micro businesses and how far apart the producers would be from the retailers. So there was some kind of consideration there around how to create structures that facilitate resource efficiency in the supply chain of the market. But we haven't yet kind of delved that deeply specifically into the kind of provisioning costs, things like fuel rates, fuel costs, transportation costs of the materials being used to supply the industry as an offset against the environmental impact savings from the materials that are being procured. It's certainly, I think we're still early in the process, so I don't want to make it sound like we've kind of foreclosed on that being an avenue for us to look at. I think it's just something that as we see the industry grow and start to better understand, for example, where the new distributors that are being licensed, where in the state they're going to be, how product is moving around the state, those are things that we'll want to take into account. I will give an example of how these issues of sustainability inform our thinking, even in the regulations we currently have. As we were setting up our delivery regulations, the question was, do you require a delivery driver to leave or to come back to the distribution point or the source point every time a package has been delivered, every time a product has been delivered? And part of the hesitation there was, if you think about in rural or semi-rural areas, the amount of traveling that would have to be done to deliver an eighth of cannabis at a time. So we included in there the option for the delivery vehicle to leave the point of origin with more product than has been ordered in the event that additional orders were coming through while you were out, so you wouldn't have to return to base. We are trying to think through things like that, even as we gather more information about how the supply chain in the market works. But it's still early days, and certainly look forward to delving into this more.
I can appreciate that. I believe that because it is still early days, it's good that you're starting to think about these things, because you don't want the industry to get too mature and too large to say, hey, what kind of a carbon footprint have we created with this logistics animal?
Absolutely.
Right? So the earlier we start thinking about it and start making suggestions or considerations with our providers, I think that's better for all of us.
Oh,
Go ahead.
well, just kind of a procedural statement as we talk about these proposed regulations, just for everyone's awareness. And I know this sometimes gets lost in everything, but these are proposed regulations. And so what does that mean? That means that they are not effective yet. They are not the regulations that we will be enforcing right now. That means licensees cannot flip the switch and start following these regulations. They have to go through the SAPA process, which is the State Administrative and Procedure Act. They will be posted to the register. These regulations specifically on August 28th, which kicks off a 60-day public comment period. After that comment period is done, there'll be a time for the office to assess the public comments. And then finally, once those comments have been weighed, there's an opportunity to make further revisions based on the comments that have been received or received today. And then that could have the Cannabis Control Board vote on the regulations again, which would then go out for another 45-day public comment period, at which point there'd be another assessment of public comments and eventually finally be voted on to be made effective. So that's kind of like the long-term trajectory of proposed regulations. And just wanted to make that clear that, they're not effective yet, still gathering the comments, getting the feedback, and then trying to make, the best regulations we can.
Alan?
John, are you done with the slides? Are we hopping into kind of the discussion section? Okay. On the sustainability part, I guess back to my earlier question, has anyone's sustainability plan been approved yet? Or has the office received plans that they're starting to read? Or are we just in the beginning stages of that?
Still in the beginning stages.
Okay. Because that's the basis of the loyalty program, right? Which a lot of people are kind of waiting for. Okay. Is there like a timeline? Are we asking licenses to submit sustainability plans on their packaging or not yet?
Not yet. So the sustainability plans will be due at a minimum at the point of license renewal.
Okay.
So that's when you've got to have it submitted, but you can submit prior to that.
Okay. Got it.
So how does that relate to the loyalty? So, because it's the precursor, right?
Right. Yeah. The sustainability plan is the precursor to the loyalty program, the way it's currently written. Now, the proposed regs change that a little bit, basically. So originally, the sustainability program was a precursor to the loyalty program for the brands. So you were rewarding the brands who use compostable packaging, for example, by giving them access to a loyalty program with their customers. Maybe they're taking back the batteries to recycle, so on and so forth. But in these proposed regs, the loyalty program expands past the brands having a loyalty program and into the stores having a loyalty program. So I guess to your point, Pete,
Chicken and the egg.
yeah, it's a chicken and egg type situation. Do we now all wait until the loyalty programs begin for the retailers? Or do we accelerate the sustainability program that had originally been put in the regs around packaging for the brands? Is that kind of what?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, so I'll just speak administratively. So the idea of kind of moving the sustainability plan to the renewal it was a natural touch point when all the licensees are coming back to the office. So it just presents us the opportunity to kind of bake that into the renewal. And that way it just becomes a natural, like, did someone do this? Yes, no, make it part of the renewal. But I think you made a great point here that there needs to be guidance in something beforehand, tying in the loyalty program into the eventual sustainability program, which will get reviewed during renewal. I don't know if Dan.
Yeah, I think that's bang on, and this is part of the reason why we get the feedback on the proposed regulations as we're going through the process. Obviously, we've seen so much interest in the loyalty programs that we don't want to wait until the point of renewal before these programs are active. And so the kind of the administrative piece is going to be for the office to figure out how to make sure that we are not kind of precluding people from being able to start capitalizing on these really valuable programs really as quickly as possible once these regs go into effect. But we also don't want to create too much distance between the loyalty programs and the sustainability efforts, because we think it helps focus the mind. So yeah, as Pat said, everyone is going to have to submit their the sustainability programs at the time of renewal. So that's kind of the drop dead date. The administrative process by which we would be going from sustainability program approval to loyalty program activation, that administrative process I think will be worked out as we're going through this kind of regs consideration.
Okay.
Sarah? We'll come back to that.
Oh, are you done?
No, I mean, I got a bunch more. No, because mine will take forever. No. You trust me, mine will
Let's
take a
break
long
up
time.
now. We'll break
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Okay. So the public health voice in the room is Hassan, I don't know. So I think a lot of good work has been done around enforcement, and that's exciting, but we are literally, with the proliferation of the illicit market, in a public health crisis. I'd be interested to know what's happening when we're shutting down or locking up some of these stores from an enforcement perspective. What is happening? What are we seeing? Because what we see in our communities, and I hear this from local health departments all the time, is that these businesses are just reopening under new LLCs. And I think there's a lot of overlap between the tobacco control piece and the flavored vape piece of what my members are doing and charged with, and what's happening with the cannabis enforcement. These stores are all selling the same products, right? So there's overlap there. And I suspect that even though we're doing some good work in enforcement, and congrats on that, we need to take a closer look at what's actually happening. And so, I respect very much supporting the legal market and those that are doing this good work, but I'm getting just a little nervous to hear we're trying to adapt to the fact that we have this illicit market that is, threatening public health. And so we're changing regulations based on that. So when I hear things like, price reduction instruments, coupon programs, and seeing that proposed in regs, are we implementing that to help, the legal market thrive because of the illicit market? And can our focus more so be on shuttering and taking care of this illicit market? Because, we've learned a lot of lessons from tobacco control and public health law in terms of price reduction instruments make these products more accessible to younger populations and more vulnerable populations. So it's very concerning from my perspective to hear proposals like that. But I also want to say that there are some good, I reviewed the regs, there are some good suggestions here. So, I just want to caution, and I know I heard you say public health several times, that public health needs to be considered here. Now, I'm not seeing any, prevention programs or money going from the revenue of this going into public health programming, going to public health community workers that are employed to work with communities and make sure these communities are ready for these types of regulatory changes. So those are just my thoughts.
Yes, if I might just respond quickly to that. Excellent points. And maybe I'd think about it in a couple of different ways, maybe 3 different points here. First, specifically on kind of what the animating reasons were for these proposed changes in regulations. Almost from day one, our licensees have been asking for much of this. We were hearing real challenges from people who, I remember in one case, their storefront was a little bit recessed off of the main sidewalk, and the signs affixed to their property just made them invisible. They couldn't be seen. In other cases, in Albany, we've got signs directing people to dispense, billboards that are directing people to dispensaries in Massachusetts, but our folks aren't able to leverage billboards. So the bulk of this was being driven by and animated by kind of feedback we were getting from our licensees based on the limitations that they were experienced based on our initial round of regulations. And with PLMA specifically, we did what we tell consumers. We started low and go slow. You know, we wanted to see how this was going to play out because candidly, having traveled to a lot of other regulated jurisdictions, I'm not sure anyone in the state had interest in having kind of bright neon cannabis infused vape billboards as you're driving down the highway. You know, we have seen what hyper-progressive markets with their cannabis regulations look like, and I think there was real concern that we didn't want to end up there. So I think this is a kind of an attempt at a more measured approach based on the feedback that we've been getting that was principally animated by the feedback we were getting from our licensees, but which had the attendant benefit of enabling our legal market to compete more efficiently against the unregulated market. On the enforcement front, I will say, you know, just a massive shout out to both the state task force, which includes OCM, the Department of Tax and Finance, and other partners, as well as to the NYPD, our partners of the city, who have collectively closed nearly 1,000 dispensaries to date. You know, for folks who never thought this day was coming, it's been a massive, massive dent. And particularly the prioritization of the illicit operators near our legal dispensaries. You know, we've had, while on average, downstate for operators who've been open for more than 12 weeks, we've seen 100% increase. There's some stores I was looking at that have seen 300, 400, 500% increase in sales over the last 12 weeks. So really meaningful impact by shuttering these stores. We certainly hear what has been driving this for many of us is the real public health issues that we're seeing. Kids in school uniforms walking to these stores and walking out with products that they shouldn't have. Significant mislabeling of what is in these stores from origins unknown with contents undeclared. So you know, I don't want to suggest that these very substantial PLMA changes were motivated by us trying to make the legal market more competitive. I think that is a attendant benefit, but not an animating reason for it. But we do think that as we are seeing these types of rules go into play or being proposed, the opportunity to raise consumer awareness about the legal alternative. And much of the cannabis research has shown that, you know, the price between the illicit market and the legal market doesn't need to be a parity. It just needs to be close enough that consumers will value the attendant benefits of being able to order online, go into a good store, into a well-managed, well-designed store with well-trained budtenders, large selection of products. And so there's so much value being created by the legal market that these tools will help the legal market be more visible, help our brands be, give them a little bit more flexibility in how they run their businesses, and enable us to compete more effectively.
I think there absolutely has to be a balance, and I respect and appreciate that. I'm less concerned about billboards and fonts and colors than I am about coupons and price reduction instruments. And I suggest we take a closer look at that and see what the public health implications are there.
So,
yeah. Well, that's that's exactly what I was going to say before. Is the discount program here, as written, is very broad. And I think I've been getting a lot of questions both from the supply chain side and a lot of retailers about whether there's going to be boundaries on the program and who's responsible for paying for those discounts. I think it's not super clear whether these fall on the retailer or the supply chain. I think there's been some instances in other states where you do the buy one, get one freeze, and what happens is the suppliers are using it as a form of marketing. And so they're just dumping a lot of product on the retailers and they're saying, give out a free vape for everyone that somebody else buys. And so you begin to put on significant downward pressure on these stores that with 280E and not being able to deduct their cost of goods, their margins are already pretty slim. So once you do the downward price pressure, like we've been seeing in other states, you know, they're going to have a hard time staying open in reality, you know, even though the market's growing, but it's going to, you know, we want to prevent them from having really, really small margins. And so I think that's part of the regs as they are proposed is the broad language on the discounts, whether there's a cap to discounts, whether and who's responsible and how that looks. And I know we're still waiting on some track and trace stuff, and I know the office is still waiting on a lot of more staff for enforcement and compliance. So like, hopefully once that comes into play, this won't be such a potential issue, but I think right now, yeah, I've also heard a lot of concern from both the supply chain and the retailers on the discount program, outside of the public health thing.
I would just second that. I think in general, licensees in the market is really good about adhering to language that's clear. And it's just explicit and
You want to turn on your mic?
it's just explicit, and in a new emerging market, it's something that's needed. So I think the clarity among that language is important. So if the intent of the language is to help people move product that, is within the last 3 months of expiration or whatever the issue might be at hand, I think we need to go back to the intent and then draft the language that makes it clear of what the intent of the discount is, so that if it's, again, moving product, let's figure out that mechanism and make it clear. So both parties throughout the supply chain and the retail side know exactly what their limitations are. Because right now it's seemingly a free-for-all, the way it's worded.
No, look, we've received feedback on a lot of things. I think discounts was probably one of the most animated things of feedback that we've received. And to a certain extent, I actually really appreciate that. That's what this process is designed for. So I'll begin by re-stressing for our licensees, these rules are not in effect yet. So if compliance shows up and you're doing this stuff, you will have a statement of findings issued against you. Two, this is the reason why we have the public comment period, why we rely on the expertise and insights of the subject matter experts on the CAB, is we've been hearing table pounding, we want discounts, we want discounts, we want discounts. We're like, okay, let's see what that looks like. And they're like, no, we don't want those kinds of discounts. Okay, perfect. Let's fine tune. I hope that if nothing else, what this exercise shows is the office is a learning organization. We're receptive to the feedback. We are watching very deeply what's happening in the market as it grows, and trying to iterate how we refine our regulations to ensure that we can drive as optimal outcomes as can be achieved under the circumstances. So we'll certainly be kind of taking in the feedback that we're getting on this and continue to work on this. Broadly, I think we've seen pretty strong support for most of the provisions in here. The discounts seem to be the most animating one. And so I'm sure we will be going through a couple of rounds of revisions here as we fine tune this. But we certainly welcome the feedback and have appreciated the balance that the market is seeking to achieve with these proposals.
I just want to say a couple of things, and then Alan may have more. But as the person who represented the state of New York and its litigation against the tobacco industry and was took 6 months off from my private practice to actually remove the tobacco billboards around the state. I think we have to be very careful with the billboards. I think they have a role, and obviously, we want retailers who can't be found to have some help, and also, it's not right that you're driving on I-90 in Massachusetts, seeing billboard after billboard, and you're driving into New York and still seeing some maybe, and then our dispensaries can't use them. But, there's a long history of tobacco billboards being targeted in communities that we're trying to help now. And I just think we have to be super careful about how many and how they're utilized and what's on them. And I do want to say that I think I've seen some things, and I don't want to disparage any of our current licensees, but there are some of them that have been approved whose names and logos are scarily close to children's television and cartoons and other things. And, there's one in particular that has a pretty high profile. I don't want to name them because I don't want to say anything disparaging, but, as soon as I saw it, within 10 seconds, I said, this looks to me like a children's television program. And somehow it got approved. And I don't know what the mechanism is to look at that, but I just think we have to be really careful as we're making these changes, and to sort of underline Sarah's point, there's a balance here, but I'm hoping that at some point, some of those decisions will be looked at and maybe some changes can be made. So it can't be used as an example going forward, or, I know it's not ill-intentioned, but I think we have to be really careful. Alan.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that kind of gets to my next question, probably a really brief one. I know as the subcommittee for industry and markets, we've been talking about brand licensing for quite some time, specifically to prevent what Chair Bellick is talking about, because if they're not licensed in the state, but they're being sold through another processor or manufacturer, it's really hard to hold them accountable. And so one of the things that are in your proposed regs is this idea of a brand representative. I'm not clear on what that intends to be, but because there's some language that's saying that the office wants to capture activity from these individuals who have been operating in the market. So are we talking about a similar thing where there might be a brand in a store who has a representative that is tabling or doing education that potentially might be out of compliance, and you're trying to figure out what that is or who that is? Or am I reading this differently than it was written?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So, the part of what we're trying to do is provide a framework for these activities to happen, as long as but it happen in a compliant way.
Mm-hmm.
So the brand license is an important way for us to capture folks who may not necessarily be doing the manufacturing in state, but who have the products on the shelves. The brand representative is essentially that the folks who are kind of the street teams for these entities, whose kind of behaviors and activities we just want to make sure that we've created some guardrails around. So I don't know if that answers the question.
A little bit, but I mean, are you gonna have brand representatives register? How will you capture activity from them, which is what's written in the regs about what they're doing? Because right now, tabling is one of those things that it's not explicitly prohibited in regs anywhere or in statute, but it's prohibited in 2 or 3 different guidance documents. And it's prohibited, I know, in both the welcome packet on the retailers and the welcome packet on the processors and the manufacturers, but it is still occurring a lot in the stores. But it's not in statute, it's not a reg, so it's only in guidance. So I'm just curious, I guess maybe Pat, from an operations perspective or compliance perspective, now that it's happening and we are acknowledging brand reps are in stores, what does that look like the way these regs are written?
Yeah, exactly. You kind of hit the nail on the head. And so when we first wrote part 128 and 129, it talked about, media, print, so online, covering more of what you think of colloquially when you think of an advertisement. But as we all know now, especially after 2 years of having this market running, a lot of this is coming through brand representatives who are showing up at dispensaries, different events, and just in a lot of different areas in the community. And so this was really an attempt to tie some of the provisions that went out in the general regulations related to retail advertising specialties and kind of stuff that retailers can accept from those brand licensees with our packaging and labeling and advertising regulations. So they kind of speak the same language. There might be some more detail that's needed to outline what, just explicitly to your point, Pete, what these brand representatives can and can't do when you're crossing the line, when you're not crossing the line. And I think that's a perfect opportunity to address in comments.
Okay, and then, so we could address those in comments as a cab and as whoever, as an industry or the public. But then you'll be rewriting them, I guess, if they were to come out for another public comment period. And it's kind of what you were saying is the process.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So 60-day public comment period, we review, we incorporate the edits, and then we'll put it out for at least another round of 45-day public comment. Consideration.
Awesome. All right, that was my last one.
All right. Anybody else have any other comments? Any other CAB members have any other comments about the PLMA regulations that they'd like to make at this time? All right, we're going to move to the public convenience regulations. I do just want to say, because I never miss an opportunity, I hope that everybody listening to this discussion got a good sense and an underscore of the role that the CAB can play and the deep level of knowledge that everybody on the CAB brings from their own perspective in the industry, and we appreciate so much being given this opportunity. So with John, I'm going to turn it back to you for public convenience.
Thank you. So the second big regulatory proposal we're going to be discussing today is public convenience and advantage. And so by way of context, on August 6th, the Cannabis Control Board approved regulations for public convenience and advantage. These regulations were designed to provide a more comprehensive and flexible evaluation process for licensing decisions, potentially allowing for more nuanced consideration of factors beyond the strict distance requirements, as was previously the limitation in the initial version of these regulations. Changes to these regulations were needed to help clarify the public convenience and advantage process and to give the board more flexibility to adapt the process in response to changing market conditions. So the previous regulations were problematic because they didn't specify who could request a public convenience and advantage waiver, nor did they included criteria that were also already factored into the public interest standard into whether or not to consider granting this waiver in the first place. So ostensibly, we're using the term public interest in its definition, which legally and technically is problematic. So including the same criteria poses operational challenges for the office, and the new amendments remove the redundant criteria from the regulations, granting the board more discretion to issue criteria to determine what public convenience and advantage is, what the waiver process should look like, and adapt that to reflect prevailing market conditions. In essence, the changes are designed to provide a more comprehensive and flexible evaluation process for licensing decisions, potentially allowing for more nuanced consideration of factors beyond just the distance requirements, as was previously the limitation in these regulations. As New York's cannabis industry continues to grow and evolve, new licenses are issued and further enforcement actions taken, the office will need to ensure that there are additional criteria that can be set in guidance to allow for evaluation of additional requests from our licensees, from our stakeholders, for public convenience and advantage based on the latest regulatory factors and the existing market dynamics. So one important point about public convenience and advantage is it does not apply to properties that do not meet the existing standards for distances from schools, houses of worship, or public youth facilities. So you still have to meet those minimum requirements. The consideration for public convenience and advantage would be critically just around distances from licensed establishments. So what is PCA? All adult use retail licenses and micro businesses with retail premises must adhere to the distance requirements in the regulations. In a municipality where the population is over 20,000, there's a 1,000-foot minimum distance between proposed licensed premises. In municipalities where you have a population of less than 20,000, there's a 2,000-foot radius requirement. So public convenience and advantage requests will enable provisional licensees whose proposed locations have been rejected due to its proximity to another retailer, the ability to grant, to apply to the board for a waiver that would enable that licensee to operate in that location based on this issue of public convenience and advantage. So on the next slide, we'll show some of the criteria that we are considering as potential evaluation criteria for discussion. So we already have the radius distance, the 1,000 foot, 2,000 foot radius as a consideration. We could also potentially look at the distance between locations based on pedestrian or car travel. Another potential issue to look at would be how many locations are you conflicting with? So are you trying to add a location in a jurisdiction or in a market that the new proposed location would overlap with 5 existing retailers? Or are you only competing with one retailer or one micro business? 3, we could potentially look at municipal engagement as a criteria here. So at least at a minimum, notifying the municipality that you intend to locate a business in within the proposed or within the minimum distance requirements of the 1,000 foot to 2,000 foot view. Other considerations: population of the jurisdiction in which this is where the proposed business might operate, and specifically not just population density, but the retail density based on that population. How many illicit dispensaries are operating in that jurisdiction? What does that tell us about the level of demand in the market? And how close are those unlicensed dispensaries, both that are operating and that have been padlocked? How close are they to the proposed location? And then another one that
what's the import of that to the consideration?
So, given that we have been seeing such a significant lift in retailer performance in locations where there's been a high illicit market saturation, and we've shut those illicit stores down. Part of what the kind of understanding the density, the saturation of illicit operators, I think it could potentially serve as an indicator for level of demand in the market. Okay. And based on the data that we've collected so far, how much lift we would expect to see once we're able to go in and right. Padlock those locations.
Okay, but not a reason not to put.
Not a reason not to. Yeah. And these, again, just points for discussion, for deliberation as we think about the PCA criteria. And then another important one, we've approached in our current regulations these radii as being strict standards. But there wasn't consideration of, say, things that might be physical barriers that actually create true separation between the proposed locations in a way that meaningfully means they're serving 2 different audiences. So do you have a major highway, or are you across the river? Do you have to, cross a bridge that means you're driving 10 miles round distance to get between these 2 locations, which essentially most consumers wouldn't do? Are there other kind of physical barriers, geographic or topographic structures that would create sufficient separation to essentially have these businesses be serving 2 different audiences? That could potentially be one of the criteria that we consider here.
I would like to offer a suggestion, just because I always think it's so important that we be transparent. And this is not a criticism, because this, as we all know, we're trying to get this off the ground. And but there have been a number of folks who've been told that they had proximity protection and then told someone else was getting it instead of them. And I do think that should be part of the criteria for evaluating, because some of these folks spent money after being told they had proximity protection on rent and other things. And, I'm not saying that the ultimate decisions were right or wrong, but I do think reliance on what we're telling people is an important criteria to look at. So as you're considering these, I think that might want to be one that we add to the list.
I have some thoughts here. This is another one that where really public health comes into play. You know, the density of retail establishments is directly correlated with number of hospital, maybe unintentional hospital admissions related to cannabis. Studies have shown that. We also see that in the tobacco industry, although two very different industries. It's something that we need to think about. We want to make sure we're not creating unintended disadvantaged communities by overpopulating or over licensing in a small area. We also need to think about the communities, right? Are the communities prepared for that? Do we have the appropriate prevention programs put into place in communities? No, we don't. The illicit market is a real thing, and we have to realize that if we, even if we're setting up legal market licenses within close proximity to one another, the illicit market is still there, and so we're going to have even more. So, does the community have prevention programs? Does the community have access to healthcare services? Does the community have a hospital? You know, I'm thinking about upstate rural communities. They may not be prepared for the influx of this. What are the socioeconomic, you know, factors contributing to the community that we're looking at these waivers for? I think, you know, maybe even conducting some kind of health equity impact assessment for each of the waivers, perhaps a heavy lift, but you know, certainly something that I think from a public health perspective is super important. You know, maybe including, you know, a look at, you know, the crime index of the community. But there's nothing up here on this checklist that's health related. And I just want to flag that as something that I think is super valuable and important here. Again, I think having a waiver process makes sense. That's all good, but we want to make sure that we're also protecting the health of the community and the constituents living in that community.
I think you made a great comment, but I also think that can go into the expansion of the medical program and the new medical organizations that are coming on board, the new ROs that are invested in health equity and social equity as well. So we can probably talk about that another time, but I think that was addressed with the new medical RO applications, being in medically underserved areas, supporting patients with medical cannabis, education of the community from a public health perspective as well.
Maybe just kind of two broad points as we think about this. This is obviously still very much in development, but I think points very, very well made. And at a macro level, I would say that I don't think the intent here is to create green zones. I think this is something that we've been discussing for a very long time, and we've seen the impact that it has not just on communities, but on the businesses themselves. So this is certainly something that we want to approach in a very intentional and careful way. And two, I think the concerns specifically around kind of the potential public health implications. Obviously, we're going to be taking in and analyzing all of as much data as we can get from every vector that we can to inform our evaluation process here. But certainly remains a robust set of requirements still to flesh out and build out as we try to get this thing off the ground.
Not drawing the parallels to the packaging and labeling regs we just talked about, but it really is, you know, I think the start low, go slow model applies again in this situation as it does in a lot of cannabis situations of, you know, this concept was already contemplated in the regs and in the law. The board can consider this public convenience and advantage, but doing so in a very measured approach that is taking great care, especially in the beginning as the market is growing. I think just makes a lot of sense. You know, 10 years down the line, this might not even be a huge conversation, and it's kind of more about the market kind of decides this type of thing. But right now, we really are at an interesting point of where all these people are out there starting up their new businesses, and taking a measured approach is probably the smart policy move starting now.
And so I think a really important point that I'd like to build on from what Pat made. Pat made a really important point that I want to build on. So in the board vote 2 weeks ago with the proposed kind of change to the PCA and the removal of the requirements. I think it gave the incorrect impression that we were removing any criteria for public convenience and advantage. The intent was to come back with actually a much more robust, targeted and market appropriate set of considerations because what we had in the existing regulations didn't work. And so I just want to really stress to allay the concern that we've certainly heard that we've thrown out any framework or guidance around this and now it's going to be a total free-for-all. That is absolutely not our intent here. The intent is to come back with, is to create very well-defined kind of measurable or replicable criteria that enable this to be done in a kind of systematic and sustained way. It's not that we're doing away with at all. So really wanted to stress that because I understand that there's some misunderstanding.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think there's been some confusion, John, because at some of the Cannabis Control Board meetings, there's been some members who have basically compared these dispensaries to coffee shops. And I think that might be where some of that's coming from. Oh, forget it. We're just going to throw out these regs, forget about 1,000 foot and treat them like coffee shops. I think the reality is that's a very misinformed opinion because of all of the issues we've discussed here. And it goes to the chair's comment earlier is that, you know, as a CAB, we are in statute, we have to recommend licensing to the CCB and changes around licensing. And I think this is probably one of the most important recommendations we'd be able to make. The CCB members, I don't think have ever been to a CAB meeting, actually, maybe once, one of them. And so I think this is a prime example of the, you know, we do need to create a process on how to work together and make those recommendations to the CCB so that we can kind of stop the fears that we're just going to, you know, throw everything out and just, it's a free for all, like a coffee shop, which it's not, and then figure out how to kind of, you know, put that conversation back on track to make some sensible guidelines for this, because I agree that there are instances where you do need a variance for dispensaries to be closer than 1,000 feet. So, you know, I think we're all on the same page here. Then the next question becomes like, from a OCM perspective, you've changed some regulatory language to be allowed to make more regulations around this. Do you have a proposed or intended timeline of when to kind of finalize this list and then put them either back into regs or into guidance?
I'll say this, I don't think the timeline has been finalized, though this is something that we want to move quickly on simply because we're, you know, we need a framework in place by which to do this. So,
well, yeah, and I was just going to say comments like this and other comments we've received are always also great, and they all kind of go into that you know, formalized rulemaking. So we'll definitely be taking this back.
I think it's cannot overstate enough how important it is to have a process where people who want to seek a waiver are able to, because again, you know, these folks are spending money on rent.
Yep.
And it's, you know, doesn't just impact the licensee, it's landlords, it's communities, it's the towns. So I know the large part of what you're trying to do is create a process for people who want to seek a waiver. And I just urge you to try to get that going as soon as possible. So
it's one of the reasons we wanted to discuss this at this meeting.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? John or any CAB members on public convenience?
Much as we said with PLMA, this process is not in effect yet. So we still have some work to do to get to the stage where we're receiving public comment and affecting these changes. And then I'll just revisit for PLMA to our licensees, to our applicants, to folks who are about to get licensed. Those proposed changes are not yet in effect either. So please don't do them yet. Use the current regulations that are in place.
Excellent. All right. I wanted to say one other quick thing and then we will adjourn unless anybody has any other business. But we were, a number of us were fortunate to receive an update on the OGS recommendations. I am going to ask Pat to, at a future CAB meeting, give us an update so the full CAB can benefit from the presentation. It was an exciting update with a lot of progress starting to be made. And I want to thank all the members of the public and all the members of the CAB and the OCM staff who are here today and helping us. And go to our website, cannabis.ny.gov, to find out when our next meeting is. Go to our dispensaries. The more you go, the more money in the reinvestment fund, and the more revenue, and the safer you'll be. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you all very much.